1986, two young women who had their entire futures ahead of them were found inside their car on Virginia's scenic Colonial Parkway. The vehicle had come to rest off an embankment, partially in the water. Both women had been killed with a sharp blade. There was no robbery. There was no sexual assault. The driver's seat had been adjusted for someone taller than either of them. The killer had moved the car after the act and left it there. For 39 years, the person responsible remained unidentified. No name, no arrest, no answers for the families who had to live with that silence year after year. Then, yesterday, January 20th, 2026, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Norfolk Field Office made an official announcement. Through persistent investigation and advances in forensic technology, the case has been resolved. The individual responsible was identified as Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., a man who died in 2017. Had he still been alive, the evidence would have supported federal prosecution. This resolution brings long-awaited answers to the families of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. It closes one chapter in a series of tragedies that haunted Virginia's Tideway region for decades. It shows that even after nearly 40 decades, justice can still arrive. Kathleen Thomas was 27 years old. She was a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, class of 1981. She worked as an analyst, someone who approached her days with discipline and purpose. Rebecca Dowski was 21. She was a senior at the College of William and Mary, studying business management, preparing for a career as a stockbroker. She was known for her kindness, her optimism, her warmth. Both women were close friends, often seen together on campus, sharing the ordinary joys and ordinary pressures of young adulthood. They had everything to live for: careers beginning, relationships deepening, futures unfolding. In the early evening hours of October 9th, 1986, they were last seen alive. 3 days later, on October 12th, their car was discovered. The Colonial Parkway, known for its peaceful beauty, its historic views, became the site of unimaginable loss. The case was part of a larger pattern of violent crimes along that same corridor between 1986 and 1989. 8 known victims, 4 couples. Yet for nearly 40 years, the deaths of Cathy Thomas and Becky Dowski stood without a confirmed answer. Investigators followed every lead they could in the 1980s. They interviewed witnesses, they examined physical evidence, they considered suspects, but no one was charged. The trail went cold. The families waited. Yesterday's announcement changed that. The FBI stated that forensic evidence, combined with continued investigative work, identified Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. as responsible for these 2 deaths. Wilmer, who lived in Lancaster County, Virginia, and was known locally as Pokey, died in December 2017. He had previously been linked to other homicides in the region: David Knobling and Robin Edwards in 1987, Teresa Lynn Spa Howell in 1989, and Lori Ann Powell in 1988. The Thomas Dowski case now joins those as resolved through modern forensic methods. This is the story of Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, 2 young women whose lives were taken far too soon, and the breakthrough that after 39 years brought their families long-awaited answers. But first, who were these two women whose lives were cut short so violently? Before we continue with this chilling story, we would like you to subscribe and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. It will encourage us to do more and also help the algorithm to suggest our video to more people who like resolved cold cases like this one. Cathleen Marion Thomas was 27 years old in 1986. She had already accomplished something remarkable. She graduated from the United States Naval Academy in the class of 1981, one of the early women to complete the rigorous program that demanded discipline, intelligence, and resilience. After graduation, she worked as an intelligence analyst, a role that required sharp analytical skills, attention to detail, and the ability to process complex information under pressure. Those who knew her described her as intelligent and driven, someone who approached challenges with focus and determination. She was close to her family, maintaining strong bonds with parents and siblings who took great pride in her achievements. Cathy had dreams that extended beyond her career. She valued connection, loyalty, and the simple joys of spending time with people she cared about. Her life was one of purpose, balancing the demands of military service and intelligence work with the warmth of family relationships that grounded her. Archival photographs from her Naval Academy days show a young woman in uniform, standing tall with quiet confidence. Other images capture her during campus life, smiling in group settings, engaged in conversations, surrounded by friends and classmates. These photos reflect a person who was not only accomplished, but also approachable, someone who formed meaningful connections along the way. Her family remembers her as someone who brought steadiness and thoughtfulness to every room she entered. She was the kind of person who listened carefully, who offered support when it was needed, who carried herself with the poise that came from years of training and personal growth. Her intelligence was not just academic, it was emotional, the kind that allowed her to understand people and situations with clarity and compassion. Rebecca Dowski was 21 years old, a senior at the College of William and Mary. She was studying business management and aspired to become a stockbroker. She was known for her kindness and optimism, qualities that drew people to her naturally. She approached life with a positive outlook, seeing opportunities where others might see obstacles. She was preparing for a career in finance, excited about the possibilities that lay ahead in a field that rewarded analytical thinking and interpersonal skills. Her friends and family describe her as someone who brought warmth and encouragement to those around her. She had dreams of building a professional life that allowed her to help others while achieving her own goals. She enjoyed the campus environment at William and Mary, the historic grounds, the intellectual atmosphere, the friendships that formed through shared classes and late-night study sessions. Gentle timelines of their last known movements show how their paths often crossed. Both women were frequently seen on campus in the days and weeks leading up to October 1986. They shared meals, walked the same pathways, and spent time in common areas where students gathered. Their friendship was close and genuine, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and the kind of easy companionship that makes college years memorable. Becky's optimism complemented Cathy's driven nature. They supported each other through the pressures of academic and professional preparation. Photos from campus life show them smiling in group settings, engaged in conversation, clearly comfortable in each other's company. These images capture ordinary moments, moments of laughter, of shared plans, of the quiet excitement that comes with being young and full of potential. Their families remember them with profound love. Cathy's parents and siblings speak of her dedication, her intelligence, and the way she made them proud every day. Becky's loved ones recall her kindness, her hopeful spirit, and the way she lit up a room with her presence. Both young women were deeply rooted in family connections. They maintained regular contact with parents and siblings, sharing updates about their studies and aspirations. These family bonds provided strength and grounding amid the demands of their education and early careers. Cathy and Becky represented the best of what young adulthood can be: ambition balanced with compassion, hard work paired with genuine care for others. They had plans for the future, careers they were building, relationships they cherished, lives they were shaping with intention and hope. Their friendship added richness to their college experience. They were often together, whether studying, walking across campus, or simply enjoying quiet moments of conversation. Their presence on campus was a source of light for those who knew them. They were remembered as responsible, thoughtful, and full of promise. Respectful archival photographs from their graduation ceremonies and campus activities show two young women full of life, smiling at milestones, standing with friends, capturing the energy of their college years. These images remind us that behind every cold case statistic are real people with dreams, families, and futures that were taken far too soon. Cathy and Becky were intelligent, kind, driven, and optimistic. They were daughters, friends, students, and young professionals on the cusp of meaningful lives. Their loss left an emptiness that their families have carried for decades. On the night of October 9, 1986, they were last seen alive. On the evening of October 9, 1986, Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were last seen alive. They had spent time together on the campus of the College of William and Mary, likely in a computer lab or a common study area where students gathered in the late hours. The two women were close friends, often together in those ordinary moments that make up college life, sharing notes, discussing classes, planning for the days ahead. Cathy, 27, had already completed her Naval Academy education and was working in her field. Becky, 21, was in her senior year, preparing for a career in business and finance. That night, they were simply being themselves, two young women who trusted each other, who enjoyed each other's company, who had no reason to believe the hours ahead would be their last. 3 days later, on October 12, 1986, their car was discovered along the Colonial Parkway. The vehicle had come to rest off an embankment, partially in the water. Inside the car were the bodies of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. Both women had been killed with a sharp blade. The wounds were severe. The driver's seat had been adjusted for someone taller than either of them. There was no sign of robbery. No items had been taken from the vehicle. There was no confirmed sexual assault. The scene showed that the car had been moved after the act and left in that location. The Colonial Parkway is a scenic road, winding, peaceful, lined with historic sites and views of the James River. It is a place people drive for beauty, for reflection, for a quiet escape from daily life. That day, it became the site of unimaginable loss. The discovery was made by someone passing by who noticed the vehicle off the road. Authorities arrived quickly. The scene was secured. Crime scene technicians began their careful documentation. Photographs were taken. Measurements were recorded. Evidence was collected with precision. The medical examiner conducted an examination and confirmed the cause of death. The investigation moved forward immediately. There was no forced entry into the vehicle. No signs of a struggle that would suggest an outside attack while the car was in motion. No confirmed witnesses came forward in those first hours or days who had seen anything unusual along that stretch of the parkway. The car's position, off the embankment, partially submerged, suggested it had been driven there deliberately. The adjustment to the driver's seat indicated someone else had been behind the wheel after the women were no longer able to drive. These details pointed to a calculated act, but they offered no immediate name, no immediate face, no immediate explanation. The case drew widespread attention. Two young women, educated, accomplished, full of promise, had been taken in a place meant for peace. Local and national news covered the story. Investigators from the Virginia State Police, the FBI, and local agencies worked together. They interviewed friends, classmates, family members. They followed every lead that surfaced. They examined the vehicle for fingerprints, for trace evidence, for anything that might identify who had been inside with them. They canvassed the area along the parkway, asking anyone who had driven that route in the days before or after October 9th if they had seen the car or the women. The response was thorough. Yet, no arrest followed. No suspect emerged with evidence strong enough to charge. The absence of robbery and the lack of confirmed sexual assault set this case apart from some patterns investigators might have expected. There was no apparent motive tied to theft or immediate personal gain. The brutality of the act, severe wounds inflicted with a sharp blade, suggested intent, but the absence of other common indicators left investigators without a clear path forward. The Colonial Parkway itself became part of the story. A road designed for beauty and history had become the backdrop to tragedy. Families and communities along the corridor began to feel a quiet unease. People who once drove there for relaxation now wondered who might have passed them on those same stretches. For nearly 40 decades, investigators chased leads with no arrest. They revisited old interviews. They re-examined physical evidence as forensic technology improved. They considered every possibility: known associates, chance encounters, patterns that might connect to other incidents along the same road. The case remained active. It was never set aside, but the trail grew cold. The families waited. They marked birthdays without Cathy and Becky. They celebrated milestones with an empty place at the table. They carried the weight of unanswered questions through every holiday, every anniversary, every ordinary day that felt anything but ordinary. Yesterday, on January 20th, 2026, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Norfolk Field Office announced that the case had been resolved. Through continued investigative effort and advances in forensic technology, the individual responsible was identified. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., who died in 2017, was confirmed as the person who committed these murders. Had he been alive, the evidence would have supported federal prosecution. This announcement brought a form of closure to two families who had waited 39 years. It resolved the deaths of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. It added to the growing list of crimes linked to Wilmer 6 confirmed homicides across the late 1980s, with others under review. Yet the announcement also reminded everyone that closure does not erase loss. It does not return the years that passed without answers. It does not fill the space where two young women should have continued to live, to work, to love, to grow. Cathy and Becky were more than the circumstances of their deaths. They were daughters, students, friends, professionals on the cusp of meaningful lives. Their families carried them forward through grief, through hope, through the long wait for this moment. The Colonial Parkway remains a place of beauty. It is still a road people drive for reflection and peace, but it also holds the memory of two women whose lives were taken far too soon. Their story is now part of a larger resolution, one that shows persistence in investigation, the power of advancing forensic methods, and the enduring love of families who never stopped asking for answers. For nearly 40 decades, investigators chased leads with no arrest, until yesterday, when the answers finally arrived. In the days immediately following the discovery, on October 12, 1986, investigators from the Virginia State Police, local agencies, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation began a coordinated effort. They secured the area along the Colonial Parkway. They examined the vehicle with care. They documented every detail they could find. They interviewed friends, classmates, family members, and anyone who had seen Cathleen Thomas or Rebecca Dowski in the hours or days before October 9. They collected physical evidence from the car and the surrounding area. They searched for fingerprints, for trace materials, for anything that might identify who had been with the two women that night. The work was methodical. It was thorough. It was driven by the understanding that two young lives had been taken and that their families deserved answers. The early challenges were significant and rooted in the realities of 1986. This was still the pre-digital era. Cell phone records were limited or non-existent for most people. Surveillance cameras were rare outside major urban centers. The Colonial Parkway itself had no monitoring systems along its scenic stretches. Forensic technology, while advancing, was far more limited than today. DNA analysis was in its early stages. Databases were small. Matching required either a direct comparison to a known suspect or a profile already in the system. Investigators worked with what was available: fingerprints, witness statements, physical trace evidence. But these tools had their constraints. Leads had to be pursued the old-fashioned way, through interviews, through canvassing, through painstaking review of every detail. Multiple suspects were considered over the first months and years. Names surfaced through tips, through patterns, through connections to the victims or the area. Each was interviewed. Each alibi was checked. One individual even submitted to a polygraph examination and passed. That person was cleared. Other potential leads were followed and eventually set aside when evidence did not support them. The process was careful. It was deliberate. Investigators did not rush to conclusions. They understood the gravity of accusing someone of taking two young lives. They also understood the pain of leaving a family without answers. Yet, despite this diligence, no arrest followed. No suspect could be linked conclusively to the scene. The case was part of a larger series of tragedies that occurred along the Colonial Parkway and surrounding areas between 1986 and 1989. 8 known victims, 4 couples, were taken during that period. The pattern involved young people in vehicles, often along or near the scenic road. The deaths of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were the first in that series. Investigators worked to understand whether these crimes were connected. They looked for similarities in method, in location, in timing. They considered whether the same person could be responsible for multiple acts. This broader context added both urgency and complexity. It meant that solving one case might help illuminate the others. It also meant that resources were stretched across multiple investigations. The Parkway, once known for its beauty and history, became associated with loss. Communities along the corridor lived with a quiet unease. The families endured decades of grief. Cathleen Thomas's parents and siblings marked birthdays without her. They celebrated holidays with an empty chair at the table. They carried the weight of unanswered questions through every milestone she should have experienced, Career advancements, perhaps marriage, perhaps children of her own. Rebecca Dowski's loved ones faced the same quiet absences. They remembered her optimism, her kindness, her plans for the future. They held annual memorials, gathering to honor the young women they lost. They shared stories, they lit candles, they kept their names spoken aloud. These memorials were not dramatic public events. They were private, personal acts of remembrance, family and close friends coming together to say, "We have not forgotten." The unanswered questions hung over every gathering. Why them? Why there? Why no one was ever brought to account? The families lived with that silence year after year, decade after decade. Visuals during this part of the story show a respectful timeline of failed leads, dates marked on screen as investigators pursued one direction after another, only to reach dead ends. Old news clippings appear, headlines from 1986 and 1987, yellowed with time, reporting on the discovery, the investigation, the growing concern along the parkway. Respectful family interview clips, where available, show parents and siblings speaking softly about the daughters they lost, about the years that passed without resolution, about the hope they still carried. These images are not sensational. They are human. They show the cost of time passing without answers. How does a killer evade justice for 39 years? That question hung over the investigation for decades. It was not for lack of effort. Investigators worked tirelessly. They followed every lead. They revisited old evidence. They coordinated across agencies. They considered every possibility. Yet the combination of limited technology, the passage of time, and the absence of a clear breakthrough kept the case from closing. The families waited. The parkway remained a place of beauty and of memory. The work continued in the background, quiet, persistent, never fully abandoned. Then, in recent years, technology began to change everything. For 39 years, the families of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski carried their grief in silence. They marked birthdays without celebration. They passed holidays with an empty place at the table. They watched other families grow older together, while their own daughters remained forever 27 and 21. They listened to every news report about advances in forensic science, hoping, quietly, persistently, that one day the tools would catch up to the evidence that had waited since 1986. They never stopped asking. They never stopped remembering. They never stopped believing that answers could still come. Then, on January 20th, 2026, yesterday, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Norfolk Field Office held a press conference. The room was filled with officials, reporters, and family representatives. The statement was clear and direct. After nearly 4 decades of investigation, the case of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski had been resolved. The individual responsible was Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. He had died in December 2017. Had he still been alive, the accumulated evidence would have supported federal prosecution. The breakthrough came through persistent investigative work combined with advances in forensic technology. The original evidence from 1986, carefully preserved, meticulously documented, had been re-examined using modern methods. DNA analysis, far more sensitive and precise than what was available in the 1980s, provided the key connection. Investigators were able to develop a profile and link it to Wilmer through forensic genealogy and database comparisons. The process was not quick. It required patience, expertise, and the willingness to revisit old material with new eyes. But it worked. The match was conclusive. The identification was official. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. lived in Lancaster County, Virginia. He was known locally as Pokey. He had been a fisherman in the region. He died at the age of 63 in 2017. The FBI's announcement linked him not only to the deaths of Cathy Thomas and Becky Dowski, but to at least 4 additional homicides from the same period. David Knobling and Robin Edwards in 1987, Teresa Lynn Spaw Howell in 1989, Lori Ann Powell in 1988. That brings the confirmed total to 6 murders attributed to Wilmer. Other cases from the late 1980s remain under review. The Colonial Parkway series, 8 known victims across 4 separate incidents between 1986 and 1989, now has a significant portion resolved through this single identification. Visuals of the FBI press conference from January 20, 2026 show officials standing at a podium speaking with measured gravity. Behind them, a timeline stretches across the screen, 1986 marked at the beginning, 2026 at the end, a thin line representing 39 years of waiting. Non-graphic forensic laboratory imagery appears, white-coated technicians handling samples under controlled lighting, screens displaying DNA profiles, equipment quietly humming. These images are not dramatic. They are clinical, precise, a reminder that justice in cases this old often arrives through science, patient, incremental, and exact. The announcement was not a surprise to everyone. Investigators had been working toward this moment for years. They had resubmitted evidence to laboratories as technology improved. They had coordinated with state and federal partners. They had kept the families informed during quarterly updates. When the match was confirmed, the news was shared first with the families of Cathy and Becky. They were given time to absorb the information before it went public.
For them, the moment was bittersweet. Relief that the name was finally known. Grief that it came too late to see justice served in a courtroom. Gratitude to the investigators who never gave up. This resolution does not erase the pain. It does not return the years that passed without answers. It does not undo the loss of 2 young women who had so much life ahead of them. Cathy Thomas, Naval Academy graduate, intelligence analyst, daughter, sister, friend. Rebecca Dowski, William and Mary Sr., future stockbroker, kind-hearted optimist, daughter, sister, friend. Their families carried them through every day that followed. They kept their memories alive. They kept their names spoken. They kept asking for the truth. The breakthrough shows what is possible when law enforcement refuses to close a file, when evidence is preserved with care, when technology is allowed to advance and revisit old material, when investigators remain committed decade after decade. The Colonial Parkway cases had lingered in the public mind for so long. 8 victims, 4 couples, a beautiful road that became associated with tragedy. Now, 6 of those 8 deaths have been linked to one individual. The remaining cases continue to be reviewed. The work is not finished. But for Cathy and Becky, the question of who was responsible has an answer. For the families, this brought a form of closure, not the kind that ends all pain, not the kind that brings their daughters back, but the kind that replaces endless uncertainty with a name, with confirmation, with the knowledge that the person who took their loved ones has been identified. They can now speak of Cathy and Becky without the constant shadow of who did this hanging over every memory. They can honor their lives with the truth beside them. The announcement also serves as a reminder to other families still waiting. Cold cases can be resolved. Evidence can wait. Technology can catch up. Persistence can prevail. Yesterday, after 39 years, justice arrived in the form of a name and a confirmation. It arrived quietly through science and determination. It arrived too late for a trial, but not too late for truth. For the families, this brought a form of closure, and for everyone who has followed this case, it is a powerful example of what can happen when no one gives up.
When the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Norfolk Field Office made the announcement on January 20, 2026, the families of Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were already in the room. They had been informed privately in the days leading up to the press conference. They had been given time to absorb the name, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., and the confirmation that forensic evidence had linked him conclusively to the deaths of their daughters. They had been told that Wilmer had died in 2017, meaning there would be no trial, no courtroom moment of accountability. And still they came. They stood in the background as officials spoke. They listened as the 39-year wait was given a name and an ending. For the Thomas family, the news arrived as a long-delayed breath. Kathleen's parents and siblings had carried her absence through every milestone she should have reached. They had watched other families gather for graduations, weddings, grandchildren. They had marked her birthday each year with quiet remembrance. They had kept her Naval Academy diploma framed, her intelligence work stories alive in conversation. When the FBI confirmed Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. as responsible, relief washed over them. Not the kind that erases pain, but the kind that replaces endless uncertainty with a final truth. One family member later said, "We waited 39 years for a name. Today we have it. It doesn't bring Cathy back. It doesn't give us the years we lost with her, but it gives us the ability to speak of her life without the constant question of who took it from her." The Dowski family felt a similar wave. Rebecca's parents, siblings, and extended relatives had held on to her optimism, her kindness, her plans for a future in finance. They had kept her William and Mary memories close. Late-night study sessions, campus walks, dreams of a career helping others manage their resources. They gathered each October to remember her, lighting candles, sharing stories, refusing to let time silence her name. The announcement brought gratitude mixed with grief. A family spokesperson shared, "We are grateful to the investigators who never stopped. We are grateful for the science that made this possible. We are grateful to know who was responsible, but we will always carry the sorrow of losing Becky before she could live the life she was building." This is closure, yes, but it is closure that comes after 39 years of missing her. Both families expressed deep appreciation for the law enforcement officers and forensic specialists who refused to let the case become just another file. They thanked the FBI Norfolk Field Office for the persistence that spanned generations of investigators. They acknowledged the quiet, steady work that preserved evidence, re-examined materials, and applied new technology when it became available. They spoke of the quarterly updates they had received in recent years, how those meetings kept hope alive, even when no progress was visible. They honored the commitment that allowed yesterday's announcement to happen. The resolution covers 2 of the 8 known victims in the Colonial Parkway series. Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski were the first couple whose deaths occurred along that scenic road between 1986 and 1989. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. has now been linked to at least 6 homicides from that period. Cathy and Becky in 1986, David Knobling and Robin Edwards in 1987, Lori Ann Powell in 1988, Teresa Lynn Spa Howell in 1989. The remaining cases continue under review. The FBI has stated that investigative work remains active on the broader series.
While Wilmer's death in 2017 means no prosecution is possible, the identification provides clarity for families who had waited decades for any form of confirmation. Respectful family photographs appear on screen. Images of Cathy and Becky in their college years, smiling with friends, standing proudly at graduations, captured in moments of ordinary joy. Subtle memorial imagery follows, candles lit at private gatherings, flowers placed at meaningful locations, handwritten notes from loved ones that speak of enduring love. Excerpts from the FBI statement scroll gently across the screen. Through persistent investigation and advances in forensic technology, the individual responsible has been identified. Had he been alive, the evidence would have supported federal prosecution. These visuals are not dramatic. They are tender. They honor two lives taken far too soon. They acknowledge the families who carried those lives forward through grief and waiting. For the Thomas and Dowski families, yesterday marked the end of one long chapter. The question of who had taken their daughters no longer hangs unanswered. They can now speak of Cathy and Becky without the shadow of that unknown figure. They can remember their dreams, Cathy's career in intelligence, Becky's aspirations in finance, without the constant intrusion of who did this. They can gather for memorials with a name to place beside the sorrow. It is not the closure anyone would have chosen. It is not the ending anyone would have wished for, but it is closure nonetheless. It is truth after 39 years of silence. It is a name where there had been only absence. This moment also carries meaning for other families still waiting. It shows that evidence can wait, that technology can advance, that investigators can remain committed across decades. It shows that cold cases are not abandoned. They are carried forward until answers become possible. Yesterday, for two families, the wait ended. For the others connected to the Colonial Parkway series, the work continues, the hope continues, the memory continues. This case offers important lessons for unsolved crimes. Even with yesterday's announcement, some questions remain. The full extent of Alan Wade Wilmer Sr.'s crimes may never be known with absolute certainty. He died in 2017. No trial will ever place him on the stand to answer for each life taken. No cross-examination will ever test every detail of the evidence. Investigators have linked him to 6 confirmed homicides from the late 1980s. Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski in 1986, David Knobling and Robin Edwards in 1987, Lori Ann Powell in 1988, Teresa Lynn Spa Howell in 1989. Other cases from that period remain under active review. The Colonial Parkway series, 8 known victims across 4 separate incidents between 1986 and 1989, now has a significant portion resolved through this single identification. But not every question has been answered. Not every family has received the same confirmation. The work continues. The files stay open. The search for truth does not end with one press conference. What this resolution does offer is a powerful demonstration of what is possible when persistence meets progress. In 1986, forensic technology was limited. DNA analysis was in its infancy. Databases were small. Matching a profile required either a direct comparison or a fortunate hit in an early system. Investigators worked with fingerprints, witness statements, physical trace evidence, and tireless fieldwork. They followed every lead they could. They interviewed hundreds of people. They re-examined the vehicle, the scene, the timeline again and again. They coordinated across local, state, and federal agencies. Yet the combination of those limitations and the passage of time kept the case from closing. Then came the quiet, steady march of science. Laboratories developed more sensitive extraction techniques. Databases grew exponentially. Genealogical research methods emerged that could trace distant relatives from partial profiles. Investigators did not abandon the evidence from 1986. They preserved it. They protected it. They waited for the tools to catch up. When those tools arrived, they resubmitted samples. They applied new protocols. They compared results across systems. Persistence, decades of it, met technology, and the result was yesterday's announcement. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was identified. The families of Cathy Thomas and Becky Dowski received a name where there had been only silence.
This case teaches that cold cases are not forgotten files. They are living responsibilities carried by investigators who refuse to let them gather dust. They are promises kept to families who wait. They are proof that evidence can endure, that memory can endure, that justice, though delayed, is not always denied. The Colonial Parkway will always hold the memory of 8 young lives interrupted. But now, for 2 of those lives, there is a confirmed answer. For the others, the search goes on. We must honor Cathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, not only for the tragedy that ended their time here, but for the lives they lived before it. Cathy was a Naval Academy graduate who chose a path of service and analysis. She brought intelligence, discipline, and quiet strength to everything she did. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend who stayed connected to those she loved. Becky was a William and Mary Sr. with dreams of a career in finance. She carried kindness and optimism wherever she went. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend who lifted others with her warmth. Both women were building futures full of purpose and possibility. Both were surrounded by families who loved them deeply and who have carried them forward through nearly 4 decades of waiting. Their endurance, the way they kept Cathy's and Becky's names alive, kept their stories told, kept hope alive, is a testament to love that outlasts even the longest silence. If this story has stayed with you, if the patience of these families, the dedication of investigators, or the quiet power of yesterday's announcement has moved you, please consider taking one small action. If you have any information about any unsolved case, no matter how small it may seem, contact your local authorities or the FBI tip line. Anonymous tips are accepted. Rewards are sometimes available. Your detail might be the one that brings answers to another family still waiting. If you appreciate thoughtful true crime narration, in-depth explorations of real cold cases, and stories told with care for the people at the center, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakthrough or the next story that deserves to be told. Like this video if it brought something meaningful to you. Share it respectfully to help spread awareness and honor the memory of those who were lost. In the comments below, feel free to share your thoughts, always with kindness and consideration for the families involved. Which cold case would you like us to cover next? Your suggestions help guide what we bring to you. Sources for this episode include the official FBI Norfolk Field Office press release from January 20th, 2026, NBC Dateline coverage, WAY News reports, WRIC and WTKR broadcasts, and publicly available statements from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia. Full links are in the description below. We will keep telling these stories, not to sensationalize, but to remember, to honor, to bear witness to both the loss and the long road toward justice. Justice delayed,
but never forgotten.